Mia.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine. How are you?
So Mia, this is your world. This is the conservation area of the Munch Museum.
Welcome to my world.
Thank you. Yeah,
And these
I'm
amazing
excited
facilities.
to be here. Thank you.
Well, this is part of Munch's work around the frieze you see in the aula at the university in Oslo. He made several sketches and he worked over many years, for 5 years approximately, finding the 11 different motifs. And we have so many sketches in our collection with different appearances, with different conditions, different techniques. And this artwork is actually going to Germany now. And usually we wouldn't send many of these monumental or semi-monumental paintings because they have quite challenging conditions. Like in this painting, you see there's a lot of losses or like paint, and the preparatory layer, the white preparatory layer called the ground, has fallen off. And for this particular painting and many of the artworks in the frieze, for the aula, they have this very coarse canvas, and it's exposed today because of losses, so it's sensitive to light. You shouldn't expose them with too much light, because it's almost like artworks on paper. They're very sensitive to light. You need low lux levels and not too many months a year with exposure. But maybe the biggest problem with this painting, like you see down here, there's so many losses, and it's very sensitive to vibrations when we send them on loan. But sometimes we make exceptions if we think that the paint layers are stable enough. What's common with many of Munch's later artworks after the 90s is you have a very matte appearance or surface. And this can be both, like in this painting, due to the technique. Maybe he used a plant-based binder, because when you make paint, you need the pigment, a powder, and then something to blend it with, so you can have a smooth, creamy texture when you paint. And sometimes you want something to flow a lot, and other times you just want dry, harsh brush strokes.
Right, yeah.
And here you have this very matte surface, and which is quite common for his art. But it's not just because of the technique and the materials he chose, but it's also the condition over the years. You have this kind of chalky surface on many of his paintings, and if you touch, and we can't do that, you would have this chalk on your fingers with the color of the pigment.
So I can see why vibrations would be a problem.
Exactly.
At what point do you stop conserving a painting? Is the idea to keep the paintings exactly as they were when Munch finished them, or do you accept that time will have an effect and there's nothing you can do about that?
Yeah. Well, definitely time will have an effect, even though we do all we can to break down the speed of degradation. But we want to preserve how the paintings were after Munch's death. So maybe he finished the painting in his 70s when he was young, or in the 90s during his golden age, or often considered the most important artworks. Or maybe there are paintings just from the year before he died. But particularly those that had some years in his studios, because he had several studios at his estate outside Oslo, at Ekeli. They were not a proper construction for living inside. They were just plain structures where moist and dust and, birds, anything could come in and out, and not snow, and but probably dripping rain, and this had an effect on the condition of the artworks.
Right.
So we have, for instance, lots of artworks with bird droppings, and if we can prove that they are from his time, like there's been done research on it by, for instance, Milestein, on bird droppings in his artworks, then we wouldn't remove them, because we have photo documentation showing this was an exhibition with a bird dropping.
Right.
So it's part of his attitude, really. And probably this was not an effect he wanted, but that's artists. Well, he was so productive.
Yeah.
We have approximately 1,200 paintings in our collection, And you can imagine all of those were stored at Egli. So you need a proper art storage if you want them to be protected really well. And at that time, artists, I don't think many artists do that.
You know, Mia, what's fantastic is when you look this closely at a painting, you just see how much is going on. I mean, how the different colors. I mean, it's so full of color
and you see here how it's running, which is diluted paint. And Munch.
Oh, here, like this.
You see it's running like water paint, but it's probably oil-based paint and diluted in turpentine. And you see that in many of his paintings. And here he used a lot of impasto. Like here, we call it impasto when it has this high relief, a lot of thick paint. But here you can see he used like a spatula and some brushes and even fingers in some of his paintings. He kind of modeled.
Wow.
And he scratched a bit. It looks like we have some scratch marks here, probably from the brush. And so you have a big variety in the technique in one and the same painting.
It's almost it's almost many paintings within one painting. I mean, just this would be a painting on its own, and this would almost be another abstract. And
this is also very abstract, like you say, like cobblestones or.
No, it's a real privilege to see paintings this close up. It's absolutely wonderful. So, Mia, Viking guests can come into this room, into this conservation area.
Yeah.
And what's
nice for us, and I hope it's nice for them. We mount our cameras to the microscope so they can see in detail what we are working on. And then we would select a painting, a particular painting that's interesting to talk about. And they can ask questions. What are these phenomena? Why do you do this? And what's your background?
But just to be clear, normally people who come to the Munch Museum don't come into this area.
No, so this
is privileged access.
Can we call it VIP zone?
Let's call it VIP zone. I like that.
So this is the Infinite exhibition. It's the biggest exhibition we have of Munch's works on show. And it also shows the biggest scope of his artistry because he explored so many different mediums. A lot of it he's not very well known for, like his experiments with sculpture. The museum has the biggest collection of Munch works in the entire world. It's actually 2/3 of his entire life's production. But what I find the most fascinating is that this was Munch's private collection, because he gifted everything he owned of art to the municipality of Oslo in his last will and testament. So we have some of his most famous works, but also a lot of works that had never been exhibited before this museum opened.
And how many paintings do you have altogether in the museum?
Well, the total of works is reaching 27,000 works of art.
27,000
Yes, so it's a lot of work to go through.
He was incredibly prolific, wasn't he, Munch?
Yes, I think productive is a good way to describe him. And he was also very obsessive. He would make many, many versions of his works.
Yeah. Oh, this is the vampire.
Yes, this is also a painting that we have many different renditions of in oil painting as well as several different graphic prints. And it really tells us something about the time, the gender relations, the fight for women's rights, and this bohemian woman that poets and artists found so scary because they were so free and using their sensuality in new ways. Perhaps that's where the myth of the vampire comes from. It's this classic femme fatale symbol.
Do you think this is Munch himself? Yeah.
It could be. I mean, in a way, he was afraid of love and relationships.
Yeah.
He came from a very conservative background, and even though he experimented with free love. I think he held a lot of guilt and shame around it from his early youth. We could go inside here where we have dedicated an entire room to the motif of death, because this was such an important motif for Munch.
Ah, beautiful. Yep.
Yes. Munch was struck by tragedy since he was a child. He lost his mother when he was only 5 years old, and he's studying the effect that death had in our lives and how it can connect to love and new life throughout his whole career. That might have been the inspiration to this painting. He lost his sister as well when she was only 15 and Munch was only 14. And this is arguably one of the most groundbreaking paintings in Norwegian art history.
Tell me why.
Well, if you see it from the context when it was first made in 1886, it was shown in the annual state exhibition. Norway was still kind of disconnected from the European art scene where things were moving forward. And here it was still realism and romanticism, and painters were trying to capture the nuances in landscapes and subjects as closely and photographically as possible, following academic tradition all the way back from the Renaissance. But Munch, here comes this 20-year-old kid showing this painting that breaks all the rules, because he was so much more focused in capturing the emotional aspect of it. Even though death and disease was widespread in the arts, Munch did it in a way that really disturbed the viewers. And people, I mean, the critics were accusing him of not being able to paint at all. They felt that this looked almost like a sketch. And you can see why. I mean, there's this conscious protest against the perfection in the way that he paints the objects and the details in the body. But still you can see so much emotion in the details of the face, the disease that she's struck by, and the way she looks out at this light that might be calling her to something more eternal.
Because this is Munch's sister.
Yes.
And she died of tuberculosis.
She was only 15 and Munch was 14, and it was an event that marked him for the rest of his life because they were so close. And his aunt, who had taken care of his young sister and his whole all of his siblings after his mother's death, she's kind of surrendering to the fact that she can't do anything else to help her. The ambience, it's really gruesome, and I think Munch was not afraid of creating discomfort in the viewer. He did not try to make it look beautiful or perfect.
No.
He was aware that these kind of events were traumatizing, and this was his way of processing through this grief and this tragedy. And that's perhaps why it's so beautiful, this tenderness between the two. You can't almost not tell who is comforting who.
Yeah, it's almost as if she is the sick one and she's comforting her. Yeah. No, it's the most beautiful painting.
This building was drawn up by the Spanish architecture firm Estudio Herreros, and they really invented this concept of the vertical museum, which makes it a journey all the way upwards, and you're constantly meeting the landscape of the city of Oslo. The bend in the building itself is showing reverence to the city that was such a vital part in shaping Munch's artistry as a young man.
I didn't know that. That explains. Okay. It's the building is paying homage to the city.
Yeah, that's.
I like
at
that.
least what the architects say.
That's nice. Those architects.
Yeah.
Hi. Whoa.
Welcome to the Monumental Room.
Wow, that's amazing. Look at that. Just the size of those paintings. They're huge.
We had to create this room especially only to show these massive scale canvases. And they were so hard to transport because you can't roll up this kind of canvas anymore. So we had to open a slit in the wall, and they were lifted by crane over the fjord and placed directly into this room.
It's just an explosion of light, isn't it?
Yes, it's one of his most awe-inspiring works, for sure. And it really reflects just how light in itself is an expression of energy and vitalism and life force.
You really feel it. Oh, I do. for sure.
It's a magical moment.
It's a very special moment. I mean, what we're looking at is probably one of the most recognizable paintings in the world, I'd say, up there with the Mona Lisa.
Up there.
Yeah.
And I don't think Munch would have suspected that it would become this while he was still alive.
No, I think he'd be amazed to see this.
Yes, this was this general anxiety that Munch was really able to capture in this painting, and it's only grown in relatability as the years have passed. I mean, each time the world goes through some kind of big crisis, we seem to return to this painting, and it's almost become synonymous for fear and shock itself.
Yeah.
But perhaps the reason why it was so radical was that it seems to capture this psychological state within. I mean, Munch felt this overwhelming fear and anxiety that he felt that no one was able to relate to. He describes these two friends walking ahead and feeling this infinite scream through nature. So the figure itself is not screaming. It's nature that's bending and warping as our own mind state is causing everything to seem disturbed.
I think that's the biggest misunderstanding about this painting. It's not the figure that's screaming.
Yeah.
It's the nature.
It's the nature,
Yeah.
and we're reacting to it. It's a reflection of our own inner states that no one else can understand. I think it's still as relevant as it ever was.
Yeah, which is why it's a great painting.
And that's why we take such great care of it as well.
Yeah. So this is the exact spot where Munch heard the scream of nature and painted one of the world's most famous paintings, The Scream.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's right.
And this would have been a very different view in those days.
Yes, it would. The vegetation, the urbanization, of course, different. But one more important thing is that, Munch said that others paint what they see, I paint what I saw. And what Munch did was not realistic painting. So it's not an authentic photographic image that he does. This was all in his head.
So what we have to imagine is, we don't have it today, the sun is setting over to our left, but there was this incredible sunset with great, striking, strong colors. And that for Munch was the scream of nature.
Yeah.
Which is what this figure here is hearing.
Yeah.
And his two friends would have been standing just along a little bit further along from this railing.
Yeah.
It's quite something to come here, really, to this spot.